Imagine this. You've got a time machine, but there's a catch. You can only use it once, and it's only for one day. Now, you could go back and watch some of the greatest moments in magic history. Meet Houdini and watch him escape from a locked prison cell. Have a drink with Di Vernon as he fools the pants off of Harry Houdini. Or even take a front row seat at one of Thurston's famed stage shows. But if it were up to me, I would choose to spend that precious day with someone whose name might not be on everyone's lips, but whose influence runs deep in the art of magic, Al Baker. Why Al Baker, you ask? Because he wasn't just a performer. He was a visionary, a master of all kinds of entertainment, from ventriloquism to kids shows, mentalism to close-up card magic. He was an inventor of ingenious methods, and a thinker who blended psychology with sleight of hand in ways that were way beyond his time. He had a knack for creating and sharing magic that was simple but utterly baffling, and his writings are filled with insights that still resonate today. Now, since time machines are in short supply, I have the next best thing right here. This monumental book, The Secret Ways of Al Baker. Clocking in at over 900 pages, it's a veritable encyclopedia of his life's work, containing almost everything he ever created. For me, this book is a time machine, a way to sit down and learn from Al Baker himself, to explore the tricks, ideas, and philosophies that made him such a pivotal figure in the world of magic. This book, or time machine as I'm calling it, is not cheap. So whether you're thinking about buying this book because there are copies still available from the publisher, or you just know you could never afford something like this, I'm inviting you to join me as we crack open this tome and journey back to a time when magic was raw, inventive, and in Baker's hands, completely unforgettable. Let's step into the world of Al Baker. No time machine required. If this book sounds familiar, it's because I've mentioned it in the past as part of my 5-foot shelf of magic, but I've only touched on what it contains, and this is going to be a deep dive. The book was published by The Miracle Factory back in 2003, and at the time it was over a 50-year endeavor. Now, not all of that time belonged to Todd Carr and The Miracle Factory, the person who ended up writing it. In fact, it starts much earlier than that with a very close friend of Al Baker's, Jay Marshall. Jay and Al became friends and began to work on a book that compiled all of the different things that Al Baker had come up with and published to the magic community over the years. The project ended up kind of stalling out, and it wasn't until decades later that Todd Carr secured the permission from all of the various copyright holders to include almost everything Al Baker ever published right here in this book. One of the interesting anecdotes about Al Baker is that he published through Carl Jones out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. The reason that's interesting is that the sponsor of this video, Don's Magic and Books, is also out of that greater Minneapolis-St. Paul area. Seems like that's a mecca for magic books. Anyway, if you haven't already, check out Don's website, which I'll link down in the description below. He carries all kinds of magic books, everything from the latest and greatest to older books like some of these Miracle Factory and other out-of-print volumes. He's constantly getting in new inventory, and because he offers such great deals and free shipping if you meet minimum thresholds in the United States, things don't stay on the website for very long, so I definitely recommend you check it out early and often. So many erudite magicians have become lifelong fans of Don by shopping at his website, and I'd love to invite you to join their ranks. I don't know what you're waiting for. Head over to his website and tell him that I sent you by shopping with Don's Magic and Books. Before we get too far, let me explain who Al Baker is. Al Baker was a magician born in the 1870s and lived through early 1951. He burst onto the magic scene in the 20s, where most people had no idea where he'd come from. But it was discovered that he had been publishing magic tricks through a local magic dealer for several years before he finally started to find his own voice and release his own products to the magic market. He was the Dean of the Society of American Magicians for a decade from 1941 through 1951 and was a fixture in the New York City magic scene. But why should you care about any of this, you might ask? I alluded to this earlier, but one of the things that gets me most excited about Al Baker's work is the diversity of everything he brings to the table. In today's world, I feel like there are so many silos of magicians. You're either a close-up card magician, or a stage performer, illusions, kids shows, mentalism. But back in his heyday, Al Baker was all of these things, and more. In fact, he was not only a magician in all of these capacities, he was also an ace ventriloquist. And when we crack open this book, we start to see people like Teller, John Carney, Eugene Berger, and even Max Maven singing the praises of Al Baker. but let's dive into why. Al Baker explored all kinds of concepts, and he let his imagination run wild, conceiving some of the modern classics that today we know and love as their own very specific branches of magic, like mentalism or thread work. In fact, Al Baker was one of the first people to publish tricks using human hair as invisible thread. The pack that cuts itself, made famous by many magicians, had its origins with Al Baker. He was also one of the first to talk about the center tear and bring that into the world of magic, as well as many other mentalism concepts. But he was equally great doing kids shows, and from everything that we read, was a fascinating character. That's one of the reasons that I would want to go back and visit Al Baker if I had a time machine. When I read in this book about his humor, it just pops off of the page that he was incredibly hilarious, as well as extremely talented with the magic that he did and published. There are also stories in here about entertaining magicians who came from out of town, bringing them to dinner with all of the gang, and asking them if they knew about the vanishing spoon effect while at a restaurant. The magician, of course, not wanting to be embarrassed, said, "Oh, sure, I know how to do that," thinking, well, I guess I'll just lap it. Al asked this magician to demonstrate the effect, and as soon as the magician had lapped the spoon, every magician around the table dropped a spoon from under the table onto the floor, making a huge clattering sound and creating uproarious laughter that the visiting magician had been pranked. According to accounts written up in this book, Al Baker had a very natural sense of humor and was well known for being entertaining no matter what he was doing. These are some of the reasons why I like Al Baker and why I would want to visit him, but now that we have the opportunity to do so in this book, let's discuss what you might expect to find in here. The Miracle Factory books are nothing if not exhaustive. When I said before that this was a veritable encyclopedia of Al Baker's life, I'm serious. There are write-ups in here from other magicians talking about how great Al Baker is, both modern, Teller writing about it, Eugene Berger, John Carney, as well as people in the past at his death or for various celebrations. Gene Hugard, Carl Jones, Di Vernon, all of them had a great deal of respect for Al Baker. But in addition to all of these things written about him so that you can learn about his history, background, and how he progressed in magic, there's also an exclusive collection of letters between him and Ted Anneman from the Max Maven collection. Even though the story has a happy ending, with Al Baker eventually becoming Ted Anneman's mentor, it didn't start that way. And in fact, Al Baker did not care for Ted Anneman, and there was some animosity between them. It's interesting to read these letters and see how these two powerhouses of modern mentalism learned to get along and indeed became best friends. Even though Al Baker never really published any large books, all of the books that he did publish during the 30s and 40s are included in this book. Al Baker's first book, Al Baker's second book, Magical Ways and Means. And I'm telling you that it's incredibly important historically that these books are included in here. For a long time they were out of print, even though this was some of the best material that Al Baker had ever published. All of them are great. Magical Ways and Means has so many different facets of magic, starting off with cards, moving on to coins and bills, proceeding to silks, there's rope magic, and of course so much more. Mental Magic in 1949 explores more along those topics, but even if you're not truly just a mentalist, I don't want you to get the wrong impression. A lot of the tricks here in Mental Magic were exactly that. They're not mentalism, but mental magic. Discovering the thought of card over the telephone, or working with your significant other when you have people over to your house to identify a card merely thought of. But not only does it include all of his books, it also includes manuscripts that he put out, which were smaller collections and not officially a book, as well as all of the individual tricks that he released. But what makes this such a time machine and so fun to read is all of the advertising and the illustrations, the old school write-ups that you're getting all of this history from Al Baker. You feel like you get to know him while reading a 900-page book like this. And if all you want to do is learn some tricks, that's no problem. But if you'd like to get to know Al Baker, the magician, you have everything you need to do that. The book itself is, of course, hardcover. I mentioned that it's over 900 pages. It includes a fantastic table of contents broken down by book and manuscripts, as well as an exhaustive index in the back so that you can find pretty much any person, any trick, or any prop that's mentioned in the book. At the beginning of this episode, I referenced that the book is still available, and I'm not sure how long it's going to be. It was published in 2003, it went out of print, and then recently Todd Carr over at the Miracle Factory found more copies that he's making available to the magic public, but it's not coming inexpensively. And in fact, this book will set you back $250. Now, before you click off the video and say, well, that's not for me, think of it this way. This is almost 900 pages of fantastic magic and history, which is really a lot. This is multiple books, all the tricks that he ever published. So, in my opinion, it's a reasonable value. Now, back when it was first released, it was actually only $150, but because of the rarity of this gem, the price has gone up. I believe that I got mine for less than half of that, so I don't know what the lesson is in there, merely that if I lost my copy, this is one of my favorite magic books, and I would definitely consider paying the higher price just to have it in my collection once again. It's not going to be for everyone, but if you're someone who loves magic history and wants to get to know one of the greatest magicians of all time, then I highly recommend you check out The Secret Ways of Al Baker. If you're interested in other books that are historically significant and contain some of the lifetime work of the artist, then check out this video that I made for you. As always, my friend, I appreciate you watching. And until next time, keep reading.